Leaping Lizards raid fans. Hello, everyone. Bront CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and I've been doing some champion guides and asking for folks who are interested in other champions, and several of you folks actually mentioned that Nekmo Thaar was somebody you would like to see plays to use. And Nekmo Thaar has generally been reviewed as one of the better Hydra champions in the game. He enables a lot of stuff. So I'm not going to focus too much on Hydra, but I want to show you the fact that I've got 3 of them built across 2 different accounts. I actually have all 3 of them built almost identically, other than obviously the stats are a little different depending on which one it is. And I like all 3 of them. They're amazing, and the build actually has a lot of utility. So we're going to go a little bit of in depth of both what I'm using, why it's certainly useful in Hydra, and then we'll talk about other places he can be used for, because he's actually an amazing champion that brings all kinds of stuff to an account. So from a progression standpoint, there's a lot of things you can do from him, and even from an endgame point, he's still great in Hydra, and he's certainly useful in a couple other places as well. So without much further ado, let's get into it and take a look at Nekmo Thaar. So here we have Nekmo Thaar in all his glory. He is a really nice looking champion here. He's kind of got a dragon-esque without the wings, or at least the wings appear to have been clipped, but a lot of cool details in him. And I think he did a great job. Raid always does a great job with the visuals, so that's not a huge surprise here. But he's got an amazingly focused kit that works very well for a lot of useful stuff. He is definitely a speed champion. He's one of the better speed champions of the game, particularly for PvE content, but he can certainly be used in PvP as well. He is pretty amazing. Starts off with a 19% aura in all battles for speed. That is good. You can certainly get better all speed aura battles, but this makes him useful in any and all content, particularly because Hydra, the only thing you can use in Hydra is all battles, so he's a very good Hydra speed lead. But again, he plays in arena, he plays in dungeons, plays in all kinds of places. That speed lead's awesome. But what makes him really cool is just the way his little kit comes together. So he's got an A1 here that is an attack all enemies and places decrease attack. And it's only a 40% chance. It can go up to 75% chance against targets under debuff. So it's pretty reliable, but not perfectly reliable. You can throw a sniper on there, get it up to 80%. It fits in with the tree you might be using on masteries. It does some okay damage, but not great. But ideally, he's doing this quite a bit because you build him pretty fast, and so he'll hit a lot, and then he'll get some damage on a War Master and some other stuff as well. His A2, which is very good as well, is decreased speed and leech, which are some of the greater debuffs you can use in Hydra. Decreased speed means that you basically are slowing the Hydra heads down. It's the only way you can slow the Hydra heads down. And then leech allows you to heal in ways that are not having somebody directly healing your team. So it makes your damage dealers heal themselves by doing damage, which is always a great way to heal. And it's an attack all enemies, so it hits everybody. This is bookable to 100%. It's a great skill, and it's an AoE, and it's on a 3-turn cooldown. But what makes this kit really, really cool is this speed weirding, which is a extra turn. So he actually has a slightly lower cooldown on this than it might otherwise appear. 30% increased speed buff and turn meter fill of 30%, and then the extra turn. So everybody gets a 30% speed boost, which is just as good as Arbiters or Lysandra. He also gets the increased speed, which makes him slightly better than an Arbiter, for example, as far as a speed champion is concerned in like an arena, as good as your Lysandra, for example. But Lysandra certainly adds some additional removal of turn meter as well into her kit. But the extra turn allows him to then pull this off and then hit the enemy with decreased speed and leech at the same time. Those two combined make a huge speed imbalance on your team versus the other team. So very, very helpful as well. He also has this wonderful passive that honestly I even overlook. Fills his champion's turn meter by 5% each time a debuff in an enemy is removed, transferred, or expired. And that does not have to be his debuffs. So he is constantly getting his turn meter buffed as champions take turns, as things get cleansed or removed or transferred or expired. So it just is a great way to keep him going. It just means he takes turn after turn after turn after turn. And in Hydra, that's great because he then spurs on your team. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with him because that turn meter boost is huge, and then the speed increase decrease is huge. It just works really, really well. But speed is king in this game. So speed helps you in arena, speed helps you in Doom Tower, speed helps you in dungeons, speed helps you in faction wars. There is not an area in the game where speed does not help your team. So with that said, let's go take a look at how I build him and how I might recommend building him if you don't have the same gear I do, and let's get to it. So first off, having gone over the kit, I want to recommend that you don't need to book every single bit of Nekmo Thaar. You obviously want his A2 booked. You obviously want his A3 booked. The A1 is just extra damage, and while he can do some okay damage, this is not a huge amount of damage overall, so you can save yourself up to 4 books if you get lucky. And if you get unlucky, he's doing some extra damage. It's not the worst thing in the world. As far as blessings are concerned, because I do sometimes forget to deal with blessings, I really like Cruelty on him. Cruelty is a decreased defense every time you hit a champion because he's constantly taking turns and he's constantly attacking, and they're all AoEs. He can get this decreased defense out very, very quickly, and he can get it out pretty reliably. So he's hitting every head, and of course I've got a 3-star blessing on mine here. That is a 10% decreased defense on bosses, 20% for champions. Now it's going to be hard to get to a 20% because against champions you're really not going to be taking 20 turns, but you know, against Hydra, you'll be taking 10 turns pretty easily, and might even take more. And if you don't get all the way to that 10% and you kill somebody in 10 time, that's fine. It's still another way through defense. And ignoring defense or decreasing defense are some of the best ways to do damage. Other blessings you could certainly go for. Let's get them out of the vault here. Phantom Touch could be okay if you just really need a bunch of extra damage. If you're building him in damage, Crushing Ren doesn't suck. Brimstone's not bad, but Brimstone and Hydra you really want on your single target damage dealers if you can. The good news about Brimstone is he is accurate, so Brimstone will land with him, so there's a reason to go Brimstone instead of the Cruelty, especially if you have somebody else that has Cruelty over there. You can certainly do Lightning Cage so that he protects some of his buffs instead. Intimidating Presence wouldn't be bad for him either because he's got a good aura lead and he's generally going to be in the lead. So those are a couple of options for you as well. I really, really, really recommend Cruelty, though. I think Cruelty is the best for him, and I think he's one of the best Cruelty champions in the game. So with that, I have mine built in Provoke and Perception gear. And in fact, I've got mine with some revenge gear as well, which is another great way to use Cruelty. So you're constantly getting a couple of counterattacks out there. I've got 10% chance of counterattack. These revenge accessories used to be some of the top accessories you could get. Now there's obviously a lot of other accessories out there, so I could certainly add some pinpoint or some feral accessories to him if I had some that would give him some additional stats. But again, if we're talking about Nightmare Hydra, we're looking for 400, maybe 350 accuracy, but 425 is a decent number. We're looking for a decent amount of speed. Again, the more speed, the better. So mine's only 270 at the moment. When I say only, like that's not a lot, that is a lot, but I could certainly make this better. I haven't ascended all of his gear, so I could certainly get additional speed out of him that way. It is mostly glyphed up, although it's probably not glyphed up with the best glyphs I have. So I could certainly push the speed up maybe 20 or 30 points if I really wanted to without really changing the gear that much. Tanky certainly is helpful because he's not a huge damage dealer. I happen to have him with a nearly maxed out crit rate. That mostly just happened because the gear fit pretty well, but I also have enough HP and defense, plus he provides some additional healing to go for just a little bit of a damage. But I didn't really push the damage too much, so you can see he's not quite fully crit rate, so shame on me. But again, that wasn't a priority of the build. The priority of the build was speed and accuracy first and foremost. After that, it's some tank. So he's got defense chest. This is really why he's got the max crit rate. I got some crit rate gloves. You're definitely going to want speed boots on him. I've got an accuracy banner that's got some speed on there. He's got a crit damage amulet, and that's really plays into the fact that he's got the crit rate boots. Otherwise, I'd probably going to want something like a defense or an HP amulet with some accuracy on here. But again, this is also a extra damage with the revenge gear as well. Rings, HP or defense. I could certainly get some attack ring here to add some additional damage, but again, he's not a huge damage dealer, so it wasn't really the goal. But the important part here is the 4-piece provoke. In Hydra, Nekmo and a 4-piece provoke can fairly reliably keep the head of Decay from ever getting a turn, because you can generally get him going 2 times, maybe even 3 times to every 1 turn that the head has. Because he's constantly putting increased speed on himself, because he's constantly decreasing the speed of the head of decay, the two of those combine into him getting at least 2 turns, if not 3, if you have him fast enough. And 270 is fast enough. You can certainly even go faster and get that to a 3 times. So that is why he is super useful. But again, this actually plays very well in other places, and we'll talk about that a little bit. As far as masteries are concerned, we look here. I went down the offense tree. Nothing particularly amazing here. You could certainly argue that this life drinker might be a little bit better than the single out, but not the worst game. And besides, he does do his own leech, so life drinker is not quite as useful with him because he should be putting out leech anyway. And then the rest of this is all support tree. I went with War Master because he's constantly hitting everybody all the time in Hydra. War Master damage adds up, and I can show you that in just a minute with one of the other builds. But you see, I did not go into, I'll go back to the masteries here, I did not go into Fearsome Presence, which is tempting with him because that gives you a 5% additional chance of provoke. But the provoke set already has a 30% chance of landing, and you actually lose a significant amount of damage with the War Master over this Fearsome Presence. Plus, you either then are not going through the offense tree at all, so you're losing some additional damage, or you're not going through accuracy, and that kind of ruins a bit of what you're looking for accuracy. Overall, these are the masteries for him. Again, there's a little bit of play with what works better for you versus anything else. As I said, I could certainly see going for Life Drinker over Single Out. I still think Bring It Down's better because you're generally attacking things with higher HP versus something like Wrath of the Slain. He's going to hit with the A1 a lot, so ramping the damage on up and that doesn't matter, but you're not worried about him killing anything with Kill Streak. As I mentioned, Sniper is helpful on his A1. Generally, Lore of Steel is always great. Now, Evil Eye is probably better for non-Hydra content, and if I was doing Hydra content, I probably actually should do Cycle of Magic with him, and perhaps maybe I should change that. But if you're going for arena content, if you're going for dungeon content, Evil Eye is just another way that he can control the turn meter. It's only 5%, but 5% extra on turn meter can be the difference between you taking a turn and the enemy taking a turn. So this is how I've got him built here. Decent stats. If I go look at my secondary Nekmo Thaar, very, very similar. He actually has a max crit rate too, because again, I had another crit rate glove. Not quite as much crit damage. He's a little bit slower, a little bit less accuracy. This is why I use this one in Brutal instead of Nightmare. But similar build, similar stats, similar everything. Heck, I've even got, go into here. That is not even a crit rate because this was a counterattack, and I decided I wanted the counterattack versus the extra crit rate. So I can certainly ramp his damage up a little bit more. Again, similar masteries. It looks like here I actually did go with Life Drinker instead. As I mentioned right here, went with Cycle of Magic as opposed to Evil Eye. Both builds are valid. Both work. It really depends on where you're focused on using Nekmo Thaar. But, and honestly, on my alt, I've got the very, very similar build. The stats are very similar as well. And again, I could certainly crank this up by sending the boots to the right Ascension. I could get the gloves to do more damage. I could get more accuracy if I needed to from Ascensions on the chest and the banner right here. There's all kinds of ways to adjust the build. But, you know, say you don't have any Provoke gear and you're looking for a good way to build a Nekmo Thaar. Well, if you're building him for Hydra, then Cursed Gear is another option for him because Cursed Gear will help you put out Hex. And the same reason he's good at putting out Provoke is another reason he'll be good at putting out Hex. So Hex will do wonders for you. He's already taking extra turns, so Relentless could certainly be helpful in that. That'll help speed people up even more because it'll also decrease the cooldowns. Reflex Gear would be another option if you want to decrease the cooldowns. Or you can simply build him for the high accuracy, especially if you're going to use him in arena and mostly arena. High accuracy would be good. Stun gear is another option as well, because obviously that will stun in most PvP content and PvE content. I like the Provoke a little bit better because of the additional chance of landing. Provoke is a 30% chance to land as a set versus 18% with the stun gear. That means I don't need to change his masteries too much to get the additional 5%, because the difference between 18 and 23% is much bigger than the difference between 30 and 35%. Sounds like it's not, but an actual amount of it happening, it makes a big deal. I think that overall, I think the Provoke just works better. In content where you're looking to control the other team, forcing them to A1 to attack him is almost as good as a stun, and the worst case scenario is Nekmo Thaar dies to an attack that would have killed somebody more important on your team. So still seems like a win-win to me. So let's go take a look at him in Hydra briefly. I can show you a couple of teams I build for him in Hydra. Well, at least with him in Hydra. And then we'll talk about other uses for him as well. So this here was my brutal team, and it did not quite go the distance. Actually, I think this one did go the distance. Sometimes it does the distance, sometimes it doesn't. And yes, it's pretty stacked. You've got a Venus in here, so you've got a Void Legendary, got a bunch of other legendaries in here. But Michinaki's been out for a while. There's even a guaranteed for him, so Michinaki is certainly accessible. And you can see he did an absolute ton of damage. A lot of that is from the fact that he has Hex, which is one of the reasons I have not actually removed Nekmo Thaar from the provoke gear into the hex gear. Molly does a particularly good job in this team of keeping the provokes up as well, but Nekmo in provoke means that I absolutely never have to worry about Molly's provoke running out. Venus is, I think, in relentless gear in this particular one, so she's constantly taking turns, getting burns and decreased defense and weaken out there. Othorian's just there for the damage, but he also puts the block debuffs up as well. And Nekmo, because he's constantly pushing the turns and pushing everyone forward while getting everyone's turn meter reduced, and of course Molly's doing a lot of that as well, he's just driving this team to make everyone else go faster and go more and lap the Hydra heads repeatedly. And then Shamael just keeps everything off as far as the fear is concerned, and does some additional damage here and there as well, because he doesn't hurt too bad. But as you can see, the damage that Nekmo Thaar does over time really builds up. And this is, I think, where I wish that I had cruelty on Nekmo Thaar. It would actually possibly let me change it off of Venus, although Venus having cruelty is nice as well. And this team overall just runs really smoothly. It's pretty much a fire and forget team on auto, so I'm getting 400 million, maybe more, maybe less. And this is pretty much how most of my Nekmo Thaar teams run. Nekmo is generally in the lead. If I've got a Shamael powering him, I'll often use him to push forward the team. Not always. Sometimes I'll have somebody else in the lead to increase a different stat. But having the additional speed in the lead is always good in Hydra. It helps you get the turns. It helps you hit stats you might not be able to otherwise. So particularly if you are struggling on normal and you pull a Nekmo Thaar in the lead will be great for you. If you don't have a Shamael, you don't have the other thing else. There's all kinds of things, but Nekmo just enables so much with his decreased attack, protecting your team from the Head of Wrath, the Leech giving you some extra healing options, and in fair, most of the healing from all these champions is actually from the Leech out there. So you'll see that, Michinaki and Orthorian healed themselves quite a bit. That's from Nekmo Thaar's Leech. It doesn't show under Nekmo, it shows under the other champions. So there's a lot of healing going on from him as well. The decreased speed, again, lets them take turn after turn after turn. And again, the speed increase and the increased speed. Overall, really good. So that's in Hydra in a nutshell. Pretty easy to program. In fact, he'll pretty much always do his A3 and then his A2 when possible. If you're worried about it, he always prioritizes his A3 as number 1 and his A2 as number 2, but you're going to do that in almost any content anyway. So let's go take a look at a couple other places you can use them. Now, the Dark Fae boss is one of the most important bosses in Raid, and I think Nekmo Thaar is one of the best leads in this for them. Now, you could certainly argue that Lysandra is a little bit better because she has a couple different of turn meter drops. However, he has the constant turn meter increase, and he has decreased speed, which I find to be particularly valuable against the Dark Fae. Plus, since he has it on an AoE with the decreased speed, once he goes, being hopefully one of the fastest champions in the team, he's got the provoke, so in case he doesn't actually kill anybody and somebody who's living, there's a chance they get provoked, so they attack Nekmo specifically, which is less important. You've got the AoE, which is giving some of the cruelty, which means that he's going to hit a bunch of people and there's going to be a little easier to do a little bit of damage to the team. You get the increased speed and the increased turn meter, as well as then the decreased speed out there as well. So Dark Fae is going slower, as are all the other champions as well. Makes it very, very easy to gain control of this fight once you get to the boss. And again, it makes it easy on the waves as well. You put decreased attack out of there as well. And it's really hard for them to beat down your team if you're struggling on the waves before you get to the boss. So he is great in here, but there's a couple other things you can do with him for, especially for progression-oriented getting up Doom Tower. I'll show you a fun team for that. All right, so obviously I don't have a full team here on the waves in Doom Tower, but just I wanted to kind of show this off as an idea of a team you could certainly use for progression. One of the tricks of Doom Tower progression is figuring out how to control the waves, make sure that your team goes fast, and make sure that the other team is not taking turns or taking as few turns as possible, or you're keeping your people alive in other way, shape, or form. Nekmo does that absolutely. So you get the turn meter speed increase right here. He puts out the decrease speed right here. Obviously, you get some weak hits, but that's only so much you can do. Then you've got your Syl of the Drakes here, who again, a free login champion. She gets some stuns out as well. So look at this. I've got decrease speed on everybody. I've got a stun on most of these people. She's getting an extra turn because I've got her in Relentless gear, which is a great way to build her. So I can get a little bit of damage in here. And then we've got Vizix as well. Vizix, of course, has the extra decreased speed as well, so that can be helpful if somebody didn't get decreased speed. She also has the Provoke, which can be very helpful in keeping everyone off. And so I can pretty much turn this team on auto, and slowly but surely, I should just wear this team down without doing anything at all, which may seem like a really weird team to build, but that's the point. It's a three-man team that doesn't give the other team the opportunity to take turns of any consequence. And as a result, that means that you can then put in 2 damage dealers of your choice and just walk through your floors in Doom Tower. This control method is great, and to be fair, stun might be slightly better than provoke Nekmo, but between his provoke, between Vizix's provoke, and between Syl's stuns, you have enough control to basically prevent most of these people from ever taking a turn, and if they are taking a turn, they're going to be provoked by somebody. On top of that, you're constantly pushing your own team forward, and you've got some healing with Syl the Drake, and you've got some revival in case there's an emergency from Syl the Drake. And short of a couple teams that have ways to deal with some of this stuff, like your Tormund floors or perhaps the Siphi Rotos floors, for example, would be kind of difficult with this. You should be able to just pretty much full auto this and let your team climb and with no interference at all. So it's a great team. I mean, look at this. I'm blowing through this right now. That's fair. This is Doom Tower Hard Floor 1, and I'm probably well out equipping of this, but not been too bad at all. We're 2.5 minutes in, and I wasn't even going on full auto to start with. So let's go take a look at other places we can use this teams and Nekmo Thaar in general. All right, so we're here in the arena with a theoretical team that I might set up for a progressive chance in arena. Arbiter is certainly a free champion you could get, but if you don't actually have Arbiter yet, you can certainly put Nekmo Thaar in the lead and put another speed champion like a Deacon or something like that, or even an Apothecary. If you happen to have an Apothecary and you don't have a lot of speed, High Cocoon can actually be very helpful for this as well. But again, a couple of interesting champion options. But basically, this is the old 2-speed, decreased defense and weaken, and a nuker team. Very, very accessible. Honestly, decent for farming just gold medals in general. You can do this works even on in gold 4, gold 5. Definitely will help you progress if you're using a speed champion. This is just an example again because Arbiter is free and available, but you don't have an Arbiter. Or maybe this is a 3v3 team where you don't have room for an Arbiter because your Arbiter's in a different team. Well, Nekmo Thaar, the 19% speed, is still a good lead. So you can put Nekmo Thaar in the lead. Again, it's very good to give you the control that he gives you with the Provoke set. It's not super exciting, but 30% chance of getting at least one champion out of it. You've got a decent chance of getting somebody. It's 30 times 4, so you're going to get there's a good chance of getting at least one champion with the Provoke set, possibly 2. You could get lucky and get all 4. Lydia certainly gives you some extra increased speed, and obviously decreased defense and weaken is great. Magnar is just a nuker. I grabbed a nuker. My Magnar is nothing special, but he's got full crit rate, got some crit damage, built with lots of HP. You can certainly build whatever nuker you work. You can do a Foley, you can do a Georgiad, you could do all kinds of fun stuff with this team. It really depends on your count and what nuker you're going to fit. But Nekmo Thaar is great, and this build is great still in Arena. You're not really compromising much with having the Provoke. You're getting still all the speed you need. Yes, you might want just a little more speed for Arena if you're talking about the higher end stuff, but if you're talking about higher end Arena, if you're talking about your gold 2 or higher tag, or you're talking about platinum Arena, you're not going to be using Nekmo Thaar at that point in time. He's a good champion, but he's not a meta champion as far as what the current meta is in high end Arena. But he'll get you progress in Arena, and that's important. So let's go take a look at other things you might decide to use him for in the dungeons. So looking at the dungeons, he's got all kinds of utility. You're struggling in Minotaur without having a single solo champion. Well, put a Nekmo Thaar in there, and suddenly your solo champion is getting the turn meter pushed further, and they get some additional healing. So you could do a damage dealer and a Nekmo Thaar in Minotaur, and now you've got a 2-man Minotaur team, and you can put 3 champions to increase their level and get those scrolls. or just might be faster in general. Pretty easy. Spider, you could certainly use Nekmo in Spider, especially even in hard Spider. You can actually use him as the speed lead in a hard Spider team to push your turn forward, give everybody the increased speed. If you're struggling to get to a Spider hard 10, if you're struggling to get everybody the 250 speed you need to beat the Spider, well, Nekmo gives you the aura, and then on top of that, he gives you a 30% turn meter boost. So you can do a lot less speed, and then basically in Spider, in fact, I'll go look at my team here. I've got Deacon as the lead. I could certainly swap out for Nekmo Thaar and not really change this team in any way, shape, or form at all. And it worked just fine. You wouldn't have the decreased defense, which might make it a little harder with an Acrasia right here, for example. But you've got the fire, you've got the activation of the fire. That's a pretty standard team, and you've got a speed lead taking a turn to increase your speed, letting the last of the spiderlings drop, and then throwing out something to keep the rest of the team under control. And then finally, everyone does their thing, and hopefully the spider's dead. And if not, you've got some decreased attack out there, you've got some extra speed up there, and you're in good shape to finish the fight. So, very good in Spider. Could be definitely useful in Dragon for in just about any team, in the normal and in the hard. You can use him as a speed lead, and honestly, anywhere. Even Fire Knight can be very, very good for him. He's only a single hitter, but that speed lead aura can be very helpful. The increased speed on your team and 30% turn meter boost can be very, very helpful in spurring you along as well to make sure the shield doesn't come back down on the Fire Knight. And then you could certainly put other things on there, including the decreased speed could be very helpful keeping the Fire Knight turn meter down as well. So very, very useful for all kinds of stuff. Maybe he'll even show up in some of these other teams here. But for the core dungeons, he's got a lot of flexibility and use for progression. He's certainly not going to be in your end game speedrun teams under most of these things. Although, to be fair, in Odin, I've got my Odin team right here where I've got a Podrick. I can, without any problems whatsoever, swap in Nekmo Thaar for Podrick. Now, I like Podrick a little bit better in this team because he's got the cleanse, he's got a better aura, but Nekmo provides more speed to start with, and overall is still a good champion. With the provoke, he'll also take some of the attacks that might cause other issues otherwise. So like, for example, Valkyrie might get provoked, and then Valkyrie wouldn't actually attack the rest of my team and get the counterattacks up and get the shield up. So as a result, I might not have to worry about shields, and it'd be much easier for me to get through the boss. There's all kinds of options for Nekmo, but Nekmo is just an absolute beast of a champion. He is great for progression, but he's also great in the endgame. He's great in Hydra. He's great in your Dark Fae team, which you should be farming if you're farming. In fact, I do have a Dark Fae video, so I'll probably link to that at the end of this video. Appreciate you guys hanging around, and hopefully you found this educational and entertaining, and I appreciate you guys sticking around again. Thanks a lot. Until the next time, I'm Bront CatHerder.